Yeah, right. When you throw the pebble in the water, the rings just go out, and that was the idea, was that we would have this whole group of people out in the community that are hurting, and that they would have fellow friends and stuff do that. So it was really fascinating to work with those folks, and because that was not their world, and to kind of teach them to, okay, here's a list of feeling words. What are some feeling words? Happy, sad. So that was very, very rewarding.
All right, Mike, you're going to hang on to that. We're going to go with the next. What advice would you give to SOS current leaders?
Well, it's hard to tell because, the SOS when I was there was very different from the SOS that was here. That's here. But, it was more 24-hour line. We weren't so much in the shelter business. But I will tell you a funding story I just told to some of you folks early on. So again, I think this was when Reagan came into office and they wanted to balance the budget. So we got most of our money from the federal government through, I don't know, some kind of drug prevention money or something. And they were going to change the fiscal year from July 1st to October 1st. The idea was the federal government wouldn't send any money out for 3-4 months, and it would balance the budget. That was pretty clever, huh? I know, right? Yeah. So we're like, oh, okay. We have no money, and so it was Dennis McCauley and me, and I think Jeff, and a number of us that were, kind of running the show, and we said, okay, we're going to have to lay people off. Who's the most important person here? Because should it be the director? Keep everybody but the, we said, you know what? The secretary is the most important person here. So we kept the secretary. We laid all of us off. Dennis, the director, got a paper route. I had just started teaching then, so I actually had some. I was making $8,000 a year as a teacher, or social. I think I was a social worker then. And a couple, we all figured out ways. So for about 4 months, 5 months, we basically were like, just barely pay the light bill. They got me a few gigs as a drug education person, and I would go out to schools and do talks. And the money would then go just directly to SOS. I never got paid for it. So that's a way of doing it. We don't let it. Sorry, guys. But
I asked for it.
but it was mostly a volunteer organization back then. It really wasn't the sort of organization that it is now. So I'm going to pass this on.
So in regards to dealing with the future, you got to look at the past. If you can live through the Reagan administration and the world has not been destroyed, I personally moved my entire family down to St. Thomas because I wanted to boil in the water rather than in Ipsy, and moved down there, and then the world didn't end, and I was amazed. I was shocked. I had my first midlife crisis early, got it over with. And I went down there, and I came back, and for me, you've got a grassroots organization, and that's how we started. We had people volunteer and put $1 in a hat. We got concerts where we brought concerts in. We set up the seats. We took out the ODs and we broke the seats down. So we got money from that. And then in those days, of course, you would write grants. I went to Chicago and got a formal training in grant writing. But everything is drying up, so you'll be left with the people. And I don't know how you can communicate with the masses, but that would be the answer, is to try to get a grassroots thing going where people would fundraising things and make it clear, get a lot of press. And I just believe that good things happen to good people, and it'll work out.
muscle. I'm somebody who believes that resilience is not something that you do one time. Resilience is a verb. You have to actively engage and be resilient and finding those reasons to keep you getting up in the morning and keep you going out and doing the work that you do, because it may not make a whole lot of difference to a lot of people, but you will make a difference to one person. And Bank of America used to have this old commercial where they talked about, how their quality and what they did. And it was, you saw all these checks going through, and the person said, we don't process 100,000 checks a night. We process one check 100,000 times to get it right. And that's what I say, that when you're in the helping business, that's what you do. You are making sure that one person that you're looking at today, if I'm working with Conrad, I'm going to tell Conrad, the most important thing I got to do today is help you get what you need to have. And that is how I have the culture that I have brought into my organization, and it's the culture that I encourage the leaders at SOS to think about. Resilience is a verb, and you got to show up for that one person 1,500 times.
One.
I know we're nearing the end. We're going to have last round of questions. What impact did your volunteer work at SOS have on you? And I know many of you have alluded to that, but if you could just bring that home for us. What impact did it have for you?
Can you start first, because you haven't started first yet.
Okay.
For me, I got to support my mother. There's no other cause. She was a displaced homemaker and had no money, no health care, no nothing. And I said, well, why don't you join SOS? She says, is that that place you started? I said, yeah, they'll teach you how to be strong. You're not a strong woman yet, Mom, but you will be if you hang out with strong women. Wow. Please come. Wow. She ended up, was no longer suicidal. She started singing and loving life and became class president at, what's your local community? Washington? Yeah, she get student president, and then she came over to SOS and had an alcohol license and started doing that. But if you can rescue your mother, you're
Thank you.
Okay, it's your turn. That's a tough one to follow.
Right.
Wow. All I can. What was the question again? I don't even remember anymore.
The impact of SOS has had.
Oh, how did it impact? Oh, yeah. Well, I was like I said, I have a degree in chemistry and a degree in biology, and I also have a master's now in counseling. But it sort of changed my approach to things. I used to be a very aggressively radical. I was the burn down the building kind of radical sort of thing. Versus, in fact, one of the reasons I got into chemistry was. Yeah, I was that kind of student radical. So it just it just made me a lot nicer person, and
Yes.
two, then I became a teacher over at Community High in Ann Arbor, and the social work aspect of learning all that stuff made teaching there. So I was able to counsel, a couple of thousand kids over my career. So it's been super positive for me. Plus, it's just nice to be associated with the good guys.
That's right.
Seriously, that's like, the big thing. There's people that, work for Exxon or something, all their lives. I'm very proud of being part of this organization. So, there we go.
Falling behind those two. Thinking about that, I don't think that the impact is found in me. I think the impact is found in what I have been able to do with other people, and how we have been able to have this vision, this culture, this commitment, this people who change, but they don't do anything with it.
Yeah.
Okay? And so I was then bound and determined that my change would not be just me. I kept it in myself. It's like that couple in that book you talk about, that it would go out into the world and touch other people. And I think that's been the most profound thing that I've been able to do, is to take what SOS instilled in me and create it as a culture of living, of walking in the world, and making sure that the personal mission that I set for myself, which was to never let anyone who comes in contact with me leave me feeling less than, only greater than. And that is where the SOS and the impact
A round of applause. Do we have a minute for questions? Or do
Yeah,
we want to just
questions
jump
from the
on?
audience and questions for Rhonda about what
Right.
is going on with SOS.
Yeah.
You could say it in the microphone if you don't mind.
Okay.
Yeah. Or questions for the panel.
Okay. So we'll either do questions directly for the panel or questions regarding SOS.
Hi, I'm Grace. I have a completely non-serious question and a more serious question.
Best
First,
kind.
completely non-serious. Mike, what instrument in band class were you guys sitting next to each other for?
We were both baritone players.
There we go. Former band kid, former band kid. Love to know. But more seriously, when did SOS transition out of being a crisis center? Because I'm very much in the housing department, so I have no idea.
So SOS Community Services ran a community-based crisis line 24 hours a day in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And, you know, at that time, mental health was really an emerging field. Substance abuse treatment was an emerging field. So there was some research on it and some people who had, you know, book knowledge. But these folks were doing the work with the people who were actually using substances or actually having mental health crises. And so their skill sets were sharper than maybe what was happening at the research level at that time. So it was really, practice began to inform research at that time. It was very exciting. But by the time 2000 rolled around, mental health had started to institutionalize. And so there was a decision to take the money for the crisis line away from SOS and move it to the psychiatric ER at University of Michigan, which now has a psychiatric ER.
Yeah.
And so the psychiatric ER began to handle all the emergency calls for suicide prevention. However, SOS's line, which had been staffed by highly trained volunteers, was doing calls for suicide prevention, any mental health problems, substance abuse problems, people who were lonely, people who lost a cat. Anybody could call and they would take that call. So it kind of narrowed the focus of the emergency line services, and it unemployed all these highly trained volunteers. And also in 2000 at that time, the staff leadership changed over at SOS. The volunteers who became unemployed, but they had been highly dedicated and were very trained. And there was some loss of data that I think created some confusion. But in the 80s and in the 90s, SOS had started to see more people who were coming that were homeless or just needed food, and had begun developing services in those areas. And then after 2000, those were the services that were left. And so that's how we continued in that vein. But thanks for that question. I think it's something a lot of people wonder.
Yeah. And just as a side note on that, I just read a book about how, you know, I was talking about this earlier too today, about how up until the 70s, there wasn't, I'm sorry, and just a little side note that kind of goes along with that. Up until the 70s, I had no idea about this, but that if you were sick and called an ambulance, basically a funeral home or the police department would just pick you up and transfer you there. There wasn't paramedics like there are now. So that was all emerging at that time too. So this whole idea of social services in the community wasn't even there. So it wasn't just mental health stuff. It was literally like if you're having a heart attack, the guys in the ambulance didn't know how to, there wasn't CPR. So all of this stuff happened, and now it's done by actual trained volunteers versus, you know, love-torn hippie students volunteering.
Wow. All right. Any other questions? Any other questions for the group? No, go to you.
Oh, can you?
He
Can you?
does need-
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need it.
Yeah.
For the recording.
Well, you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
repeat the question.
Conrad's question is, what are we doing now and what are the priorities? And I'm gonna give that to Rhonda.
I always like to say that we have 3 arms of service into the community. Currently, housing programs are our biggest set of programs that we have. We have emergency shelter for families, which I talked about. We're expanding this currently. We just are going to place our first person into our expanded units this week. So we have emergency shelter. We have rapid rehousing for families, which is a midterm housing program where residents hold the lease with the landlord, and we support them with some case management as well as rental assistance. We also do HCV support, so we started that maybe 5 years ago, was it? Barbara? I'm not sure.
Yeah, please.
HCV is Housing Choice Vouchers. It used to be called Section 8 vouchers,
Oh.
but now the term is Housing Choice. So people get on a wait list, they get a voucher which will assist with their rent. They pay 30% of their rent, but they'll never pay more than 30%. So it's a wonderful tool to stabilize people into housing. That's the program that the current administration is going to cut drastically, unfortunately. But we have a program that helps people lease up their vouchers when they get them, helps to prevent the loss of those vouchers, and so forth. So also as part of our housing services, we are part of the local coordinated entry system, which is a coordinated entry into homeless services. So we have staff that work with the local call center, and if somebody is in need of shelter, we do the family shelter assessment and help them get into shelter. If somebody needs some eviction prevention assistance, we do the assessment for that and then help arrange all the funding to help them avoid their eviction. We also have diversion services, so that if somebody is on the verge of becoming homeless, but that homelessness can be averted with some flexible funding to help them, pay off an arrearage or perhaps transfer to another family member who they could stay with or something like that. Or it's very flexible, so it's really about brainstorming on how you can keep this person housed and out of our shelters. We do that. So that's one arm of service. We also have children's services. Melissa over here is our children's director. We operate a nationally recognized parents as teachers program, and we do in-home work with families that have children under the age of 5, and we help them to become really their children's first teacher. We do developmental screenings on all the kids under the age of 5 to make sure that they're developmentally on track to enter kindergarten without special services. So that's our children's program, and then we also do our resource center. So the Octagon House on River Street, still in use. It's been overly used probably through these years. We're using it for a purpose that it was not built for, but that's where we run our food pantry. We have a choice food pantry. We serve about 300 households per week in that pantry. And we also have utility assistance and other forms of assistance. We do walk-in services, so if somebody has a need that they don't know how to meet in the community, they can walk in and talk to us about what they need, and we'll, provide any services or resources that we have available. And if we don't have that, then we'll help them find that service or that resource in the community. So that's all going on. Did I miss something? It feels like I missed something at the resource center. Maybe not. So that's our current level of programming. So housing, children's services, and the resource center. Oh, I was going to say that we are also now we're part of a pilot group within the state of Michigan to provide family resource center services. So we provide a lot of extra cleaning supplies, diapers, different commodities that you couldn't normally get in the food pantry. And then we also combine that with all of our children's services and all the other supports that we offer throughout the agency. So that's the family resource center. Yeah.
Follow-up question. What are your top 3 needs?
Money.
Money and money.
Other than money, we always need volunteers.
Yeah.
Volunteers really helped found this agency. They've always been a critical part of our service delivery. and we continue to need volunteers. Our food pantry is almost completely volunteers. I think we have 1.5 FTEs of staffing in that program, and to serve 300 households a week is, I mean, you couldn't do that with only the paid staff. So we heavily rely on volunteers. We heavily rely on donations, as Barbara, oh, no, that was Barbara. Barbara over here can attest. She's our development director. She's the one who's responsible for helping us to bring into the agency the resources that we need. And a lot of that is monetary, but a lot of it is volunteers as well. So we're always in need of that. And the third one, what would you say?
Denise said my diapers.
Oh, we always need diapers. Diapers are a huge thing.
Contact information for landlords.
Yeah.
Food, clothing, and shelter.
Good
Right.
landlords.
Food, clothing, and shelter. We also need landlord partners, as Grace mentioned.
Yeah.
As our housing programs have grown, rapid rehousing and our now master leasing programs that are growing, we use private landlords. We have found much more success in the use of private landlords than we ever did in like going to one of the big companies in town. So
It allows us to house families in neighborhoods, in real neighborhoods. And
Yeah, normalize things,
stigmatized in a particular, especially with the housing choice voucher, everybody's looking for houses. And maybe that's probably the level also.
and our niche in the housing, especially the shelter thing, is that we have always master leased since I've been here. I know that we used to have congregate shelter, much like I attended Alpha House or Salvation Army used to have a congregate shelter for families, but we always, for the last nearly 20 years, have been doing scattered site shelter. So we master lease private homes in the community and put people in there for their shelter experience, and I really like that model. I think it's a wonderful model. It really decreases the stigma for children. They don't know who shelter. They just think they're a special, a home for a little while. So it's very empowering to the families that we serve. Yeah.
How do you coordinate with other agencies in the area? In the last couple of years, I've become familiar with House into Home.
Okay.
And I was a volunteer there last year and was surprised to know that I didn't know about it, and that they're trying to help outfit 2 families a day, they were saying. So do you coordinate with them to house some of
Rhonda,
these
would you repeat the
families?
question?
Yeah, the question is, how do we collaborate with other agencies in the community, especially House into Home? And SOS has had a wonderful history of collaboration with other agencies in this community. Many of the things that, I'm a strong believer in collaboration. It's just too big for one agency, no matter how big that agency is. Because we can't provide all the services that are needed, and we can't provide the extent of services that are needed. So we collaborate with anybody and everybody. We collaborate with IHN. We collaborate with them on rapid rehousing. We currently collaborate with Shelter Association Washtenaw County, the individual shelter downtown Ann Arbor. And we collaborate with them on diversion services. We collaborate with the county on a number of different initiatives, including some of our work in coordinated entry. So we're collaborating with anybody that we possibly can. And we do collaborate with House in the Home. We have since their inception. They have been wonderful in bringing in they just do a beautiful job of decorating homes for people who are exiting homelessness, coming into their own space for the first time. And in addition to helping the consumers that we have who are exiting programming, they have also been very generous in coming in and doing some of our shelter units as we've been expanding. So they do a wonderful job. Without them, we'd world of hurt.
I was very impressed at how they really put the people living in the homes first. What their tastes were, what their colors were.
They do
all
an
that
interview,
kind of
they
thing.
figure out what colors they like, what
Right.
with kids, what sports teams they might be into, or what interest they might have, and then they customize every room of that house to meet the needs of that
And
family.
how does Friends Indeed work with you or not with you?
We collaborate with them on a number of different ways. First of all, they have a bed pantry, so we can get beds for people who are exiting our programs and moving into a place of their own. They also provide some flexible monetary assistance. If there's, for instance, if a family is trying to avoid eviction and has pulled together all but like a few $100s to avoid their eviction, Friends Indeed will also come in at the last $100 to meet that gap. So they're very helpful as well.
Well, I think this area is very fortunate to have as many agencies helping people in
They
need.
are.
Alpha House, all these kinds of places. So, but to coordinate it all has to be a big issue for each
It
agency.
is, and you know, for the agencies that have access to some government funding, whether it be federal or state, local funding, that sort of thing, we are often, our hands are tied by some of the regulations that accompany that. So it's wonderful to have other agencies who have access to non-governmental funding that can fill the gaps or perhaps meet the entirety of the need if a person doesn't meet eligibility criteria for one of our programs. Yeah. Other questions? You guys must have questions for these guys.
Alright, can we use the mic?
Thank these people for starting.
Oh yeah, Damien, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was listening to you all speak of the training back in the early days
Yeah.
of SOS.
Yeah.
I was impressed by what I heard about the training. I don't know if this is a question as much as it is a statement. It sounds like that sort of training could be useful even today with what we do.
It was universal over the years, yeah. Yeah. When I was a psychiatric social worker, I trained patients to accept their faults and never say no. People can help themselves, but only if they're asked. And much of my goal was just to ask the right question. Don't give the answer.
Where is the training manual at? I'll take the training manual.
Yeah, I really had a good time putting stuff together.
Do you have any old materials?
Well,
David, I have them.
We have
I have them.
Yeah,
Oh.
the
They're in
values
my office.
clarification, very good training. But we had made people think.
Yes.
And empathy training and being able to say no, very difficult for many people, codependency, and but it was all written down and we had volumes of it. And I took it out to Oregon and worked for a community action center and passed stuff around and kept it going. And of course at the mental hospital, I was training patients how to be accepting it. I said, we're all crazy, it's just what you do with it.